I'm Erica Bacchiacchi, director of the new Wollstonecraft project at the Abigail Adams Institute and co-instructor with Dr. Angela Franks of the AAI seminar, Man, Woman, Body, Soul in the Western Tradition. This short video is a brief introduction to our seminar, offered both as an intensive summer seminar and now, for the first time over the course of the academic year, starting on Zoom in early October 2020. Questions surrounding sex and gender, sexual equality and freedom are especially fraught these days, both personally and politically. In the seminar, we seek to get to the philosophical roots of these questions in the Western tradition, to get behind the polemics, to understand better the questions themselves. To that end, we've designed the course with the key questions of the Western tradition in mind. First, who am I? We start the course by trying to tackle the foundational metaphysical questions concerning the nature of the human person and of identity, and especially of body and soul and the relationship between them. Next, given who I am, how am I to live? Questions of ethics concerning happiness and the search for wisdom and virtue. Questions of education, sex and marriage, work and family. And then finally, how are we to live together? Questions of friendship, the common good, political freedom, legal equality, duties and rights, the ends of government, and the law. This methodological approach, moving both in the readings and also conceptually, from metaphysics to ethics to politics, certainly gives away our normative, pre-modern understanding of these questions. But even if Angela and I both think that Aristotle was generally right on many key points, there are still many puzzles to solve as we turn from these general questions asked in every good philosophy or political theory survey course to questions of sex and gender, where Aristotle had some trouble, we might say. And so once this foundation is built, we then want to ask the central question of our course, how we might do justice to the twin truths of human embodiedness and human dignity. We take as our starting point the single most significant philosophical work in this area, that of Sister Prudence Allen, whose decades of scholarship culminated in the 3 volumes entitled The Concept of Woman. Now, we don't read all 3 volumes. In fact, we only have a short snippet from 2 of them for our first session's readings. And we do return to Sister Prudence at the very end with a more systematic article of hers. But she really helps us to kind of build a starting point for our questions. In the volumes, she looks painstakingly at how thinkers from the pre-Socratics through the postmoderns have thought about the nature of the human being and of man and woman. From this exhaustive study, Sister Prudence has built a kind of framework to categorize different thinkers' positions over the centuries. She locates these categories early in the history of philosophy, beginning in rudimentary form with the pre-Socratics and then Plato and Aristotle, and then recurring with more complexity in different thinkers throughout the tradition. I want to very briefly lay out her framework and then offer some questions that I think spring forth from it, questions that we'll grapple with throughout our course. Sister Prudence points to what she first calls the sex unity position in philosophical thought. In a word, men and women are equal, but not significantly different. Plato and then Descartes are generally representative of this position in the tradition, and we'll be studying both of these thinkers to see how they reason through to this position. Next, Sister Prudence tells us is the sex polarity position. That is, the difference between men and women is so significant that it yields inequality, and usually, of course, the superiority of men. Aristotle, who famously dubbed females deformed males, represents the quintessential sex polarity position. We'll be studying a good deal of Aristotle, his views of metaphysics and ethics too, and then asking whether his reputed understanding of women renders his metaphysics and his ethics irredeemable, or whether his error was of a different sort. Sister Prudence then finds a third movement in the history of philosophy, what she calls fractional complementarity. Men and women are equal, but their significant differences yield substantially different traits, virtues, and educational and vocational paths. Biology, we might say, of the fractional complementarians is destiny. Rousseau's Emile is really the perfect example of this position. We see it in more muted form in Tocqueville and in early understandings in the United States of Republican motherhood. Again, we'll be reading the relevant portions of these texts ourselves, accompanied by lectures by Angela and myself. So we'll begin to see how these arguments are fleshed out. Finally, Sister Prudence offers a fourth movement, a philosophical advance from these others, which she takes to be just right. Integral complementarity. That is, each man and woman is a person of equal worth with shared or common rational capacities and responsibilities. But there's also significant differentiation between men and women, and between each man and each woman. We'll see this position in Mary Wollstonecraft and some of the early women's rights advocates, and also later in John Paul II. We'll be asking a whole host of questions of these thinkers that we'll be reading. Do men and women share a common nature? If so, on what basis? If they are different, how are they different? Is it at the level of the soul or of the body? And why does that matter? And then importantly, what is the personal, familial, social, and legal significance of sexual difference? We'll look, for instance, at Rousseau and Wollstonecraft, who conceive of both the question and its answer very, very differently. And then, can we say that men and women are equal? On what basis? Is complementarity a helpful way of conceiving of this inequality? Does the term enjoy the explanatory power that Sister Prudence would like it to, or are we in need of something more conceptually? To push the point further, are the differences between men and women simply complementary, or are they actually asymmetrical? That is, are there different burdens borne by women and privileges by men, and perhaps vice versa? Are these asymmetries natural in some way, biological or metaphysical, or are they just social and cultural, or both? Are they to be accepted personally and socially, or ought their injustice be some response to sexual asymmetry? We'll think through these questions with the early women's rights advocates like Sarah Grimke, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and looking at the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions, and into the 20th century with Dorothy Sayers, Catherine McKinnon, and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Asking this question a little differently, given the unequal legal and social status of women from antiquity through very recent history, does each thinker believe, what is the cause of each thinker believes is the cause of women's historical subordination? We'll see that, for instance, Mary Wollstonecraft and Margaret Sanger offer strikingly different accounts of the causes of women's historical subordination and immiseration, with Wollstonecraft laying the blame on men's want of chastity, while Sanger points to women's fertility. What are the consequences of these distinct views? And we'll also look at what these thinkers and others see as the primary response to these causes of subordination. And so too, we'll also want to look at the just quest for women's rights. So we'll look at foundational concepts of justice, duties, rights, and law. How do these concepts differ on the one hand in the pre-modern thought of Thomas Aquinas and Christine de Pizan, where they even thought of these sorts of concepts, and then in Mary Wollstonecraft, in Hobbes, in John Locke, and in John Stuart Mill. And then at last, with a good foundation beneath us, we come to the questions of our fraught time. Can we even speak of woman or man as a philosophical, social, or legal category anymore? To this end, we'll look at the work of Shimaluth Firestone and Judith Butler. By the end of the course, we'll be ready to bring together what we've learned in the hopes of recovering a metaphysics that can handle these fraught questions of our day, and also a more humane, just politics as well. To learn more about this seminar, Man, Woman, Body, Soul in the Western Tradition, or the Wollstonecraft Project as a whole, visit AbigailAdamsInstitute.org.